Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 21. Today we have Charlie Jacoby. If you want to say hello there, Charlie.
Hello there, Charlie.
So hello, everyone. Wallace. Good to see you again. Over the last few weeks, I've actually tried to invest in the podcast, which maybe long-term viewers will be very happy with, because this is now 21st episode and it's still done on an iPad, sat on a few boxes. But I have actually got a fancy mic now, but it doesn't work because I've got the wrong cable. So hopefully in the next few episodes you should be seeing a mic and maybe a bit of a better camera. And as you're seeing, it's a different background. Jess and I have just bought a house, so everything's sort of up in the air and we're just seeing what's working and whatnot. So on to get rid of all that boring stuff and get into sort of what we're here to talk about, and that's Charlie. So Charlie is from the Fieldsports channel on YouTube. Now, a lot of you guys listening to this, it's a lot of farming and agriculture. My real reason to do this podcast is to see people in the rural sector, and it's a meat producing industry. I don't really see why agriculture and field sports are so separate. You would think they should really come hand in hand, and I really wanted to bring in that industry to let you guys hear about it. So, we've welcomed Charlie. What's your sort of background, Charlie? Are you from field sports, or did you come into it later in life?
Yeah, so I think like many people, I started out shooting, when I was a kid, and fishing, and I grew up in rural Somerset, in the Quantock Hills. So we had, a lot of people think that, God's own country is Yorkshire. He may have been born there, but he came to live in Somerset because we have everything. We've got great deer stalking, hunting of all kinds. That our rivers have got fish in. We've got Exmoor. It's possibly the most all-round county for field sports, and we definitely have the best shoots in the country. Bad luck Yorkshire, bad luck Wales. So yeah, perfect place to grow up. But I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to be a hack. And in the 1980s, I joined the shallow end of the media and rose like scum. And I now sort of sit on the surface of it, nearly 40 years later. This is a time when we've seen it go from newspapers and magazines through to digital and principally YouTube.
And was that media based in the industry or just all sides?
Oh, it's all kinds of things. My first thing, when I left school, I got a job writing books, ghostwriting about the royal family. So, really kind of coffee table stuff about the Queen and the Queen Mum, things like that. I read a book about the bridal ways of Britain. Then I've been writing books as an 18, 19-year-old is probably not the best paid job in the world. So I started to look around at other things I could do. I am still, after 30 years, the property correspondent for the Jewish Chronicle. That is a great shallow end position. And I did some bits for Shooting Times. I was a news editor for a while. I went off and launched things like Sporting Shooter magazine, Sporting Rifle. But the thing, magazines, when you went to a game fair in the 2000s or the 1990s, magazines really they were everything for people. They practically told you who to marry, and then the internet came along and spoiled everything. So by the time we got to 2009, when we launched Fieldsports channel, people were out of love with magazines. And over the last 10 years, we've been incredibly lucky, very fortunate. People are in love with YouTube. People feel like they own, the viewers feel like they own their YouTube channel in the same way they felt like they owned their magazines 20 years ago.
Yeah, which is great. And, for any viewers from Yorkshire, we do still accept you, by the way. I know you've been called out entirely there by Charlie, but was it...
Can I say you're not an obvious Yorkshireman?
I'm definitely not from Yorkshire, no. Very much Scotland. I don't know if I said Scotland, even more Scottish there, just to push that, but... You said you shot as a kid. Was that just with parents, Charlie, or is that?
Yes. you look to parents to kind of get you started there, don't you? But in those days, the best fun was me with my 410 and my buddy with his 28, and we had the run of a local farm. It was walking the hedgerows. It was trying to bolt rabbits, sneaking up on rooks in rookeries and things like that. So it was just pest control, and then suddenly discovering the joy of a dog. My goodness,
yeah.
your day out got even better with a dog. So it was just enormous fun, and we would shoot what we were supposed to shoot. I remember the day we shot a pheasant out of season and got into an incredible amount of trouble for that. So a lot of sharp learning curves. I remember the day when I forgot to clean the 410, or I was too lazy to clean the 410, and it had a little rust down the barrel, and I thought, oh no, I'm never going to get out of this one. And then quite a lot of action with a bronze brush seemed to bring it back to life again, and I don't think anybody found out about that. So there was a lot of that. It was fairly typical, but it was a leisure activity, and the job was writing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think these learning curves come with us as kids, especially kids that are brought up in the countryside who maybe make some mistakes here and there, but they carve us as a person.
Well, it's an amazing thing about shooting is it teaches citizenship and responsibility and things like that. And I'm not I wasn't a tearaway, but I wasn't a good schoolboy by any means. So actually, shooting probably did me a lot of good.
Yeah, absolutely. I should probably just jump in. Actually, we've been mentioning field sports for a while. What is field sports? What are we talking?
Good question. Good question. Because in 2009, we tried to come up with the story behind Fieldsports Schedule. Just very, very quickly, is David Wright, who's the guy who reads the news on Fieldsports Schedule, who was in a gutter when I found him. I mean, he'd been nothing without me. But no, I'm joking. He was a talented news producer at ITV, and I came from this kind of specialist consumer magazine. We tried to collide these two things to create basically something like Shooting Times on telly, and we had to give it a name. So we could have gone down the shooting route. We could have country sports was a word we could have used. Obviously, Blood Sports TV wouldn't have really appealed to our core audience. So we hit on field sports, and it's a slightly weird word because in 2009, I mean, certainly in America, and you're dealing with YouTube, it's a global thing. In America, field sports was track and field, so it's athletics, what we call athletics. I think in the last 10 years, by constantly repeating it and by this fabulous audience that is available on YouTube, we have recaptured the word field sports. It's a slightly pointless thing to have done. We could have lived without capturing the word field. I'd have preferred to have recaptured the word cruel or sporting or something like that, in terms of moving the argument forward. But field sports it is, and so it literally means hunting, shooting, and fishing.
So yes, it is looking at fishing as well and that sort of thing. So
and we get very kind of into knotty arguments for some of our viewers about hunting. Is to some of them is people in red coats, and to others it's the American version. I mean, Google, we're all mildly ruled by Google these days, believes hunting and shooting. So here's an example. We did a film for the Countryside Alliance very early on about a flower show that was raising money for the Countryside Alliance, and that's how the Countryside Alliance made money in those days, was things like flower shows. And somebody from the Masters of Foxhounds Association watched that film, and it was very nice. This country house, a nice lady, she's selling flowers. It's all for the Countryside Alliance. Isn't that wonderful? And at the end of the film, YouTube said suggested videos. George Digweed shoots foxes. Now, there's nothing the Masters of Foxhounds Association hates more than somebody who shoots foxes. Yeah. So his reaction was to order the Countryside Alliance to tell us to take down the film about the flower show, because he was getting fox shooting video suggestions after it. Yeah. I mean, there were so many things wrong with that. I didn't know where to start. So I just said, okay, if that is your understanding of the internet, that's fine by me.
So you've mentioned sort of the transition from magazine onto YouTube. there, Charlie. There's been quite a few changes for the channel over the years. You started on streaming originally before you went onto YouTube. Could you tell us a bit about that? I should actually mention when I say this, I'll be in trouble if I don't. My partner's dad, he insists on me calling him father-in-law, but my partner's dad, Robert, has been a fan since back in those days. So he'll be very happy that I've told you that.
You're kidding. Robert has been watching since we were on streaming.
He has indeed. And you know, when we go to the house we've bought's maybe just 5 miles away from theirs. It's never not on. He sees every episode probably twice. So you know, most of your CPM's probably boosted by Robert.
that's why we get. Well, look, thank you, Robert. That's fantastic. I mean, to watch the really early stuff is very, very cool. That's amazing. So back in 2009, you know, for people like me and David, YouTube had, as far as we could tell, something to do with skateboarding cats. You know, it wasn't really a place for long form television like we. In fact, strange enough, it's still not really kind of grabbed the long form television idea in the same way that Netflix has. But the cats have moved on from skateboards a bit, which is good. And so we started off by renting server space, which is fabulously expensive. And we got our several thousand viewers very, very quickly. I remember sitting in a car park on August the 12th, 2009, watching the viewer numbers clock up on the sort of the online analytics thing. I was with David. We had just been filming grouse that day, grouse shooting, fairly exhausting day, and we were basically both a bit catatonic and going, my goodness, people are watching this. That's amazing. But I mean, in those days, a few thousand, which puts you in competition with the magazines, which themselves were selling a few thousand. No, that was good. When you hit YouTube, I mean, our audience now is 9.5 million individual people who have tuned in over the last year and a bit. So we can reach those 9.5 million people for our clients via Google Ads. And the numbers are just staggering. It's the biggest number that our market has ever seen. And you know, whether the advertisers go out through you or us or Shooting Show or whoever it is, I really urge anybody in the world of shooting, take advantage of this number. It's, you know, that might end tomorrow.
Yeah.
this is a good time. So YouTube was the way to go, and YouTube itself, you know, it's a fairly robust American firm, surprisingly. It had just been bought by Google in about 2005. It's often accused of being anti-gun, anti-shooting. There are some policies that Google inherited from another firm it bought earlier on called DoubleClick, which are, you know, don't allow gun advertising, ammo advertising, and things like that. But YouTube in itself, we have always found to be pro shooting, actually pro hunting. They engage with us. We help. There's a thing called the Creators Playbook. We helped write that with Google, with YouTube. If you are a YouTuber, read the Creators Playbook. It has got everything you need to know to get your channel up there. And I mean, what Google wants to avoid are the really obvious kind of landmines. Actually, landmines is one of the things they want to avoid. It's the backyard bomb makers. That's what they don't want, you know. So don't go onto YouTube and show 14-year-olds how to make a handgun, or you will be banned. That is obvious. There are a few things where they get it wrong after that. I mean, there's a period about 5 years ago where they actually accidentally banned loads and loads of airgun channels because in the US they hadn't quite clocked that was, you know, airguns were a thing. And although they're corporate and they would never express regret or anything like that, because it would open them up to lawsuits and all that stuff, I think they acknowledge they made a massive mistake there. I mean, airgunning is 10 times the size of shooting sports, certainly in the UK. So YouTube has been good for us. And 3 years ago, we hired somebody called Meredith Grant, who is a magician with other social media. And we've started kind of moving into Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the rest. And yeah, that also is a kind of insurance policy. You know, I've just been very nice about YouTube. It's possible that some nutter will move into YouTube and say, right, we're going to ban everything we don't like, I don't like. I think it's really unlikely, but if that were to happen, we have places to go now, which is good.
I think, I consume YouTube's probably the service I use most. TV's not, I think, TV killed the radio star. I think YouTube's killing the TV star. And that, Netflix and Prime and stuff still being consumed heavily, but YouTube's so easily consumable. You just binge and next video. I don't see YouTube dying, and I don't see channels like yourself struggling, because it's an income stream for Google, and the more they have, the better it is for them as well. But I hope that doesn't happen anyway as well. But the sort of putting more eggs in more baskets has always got to be a win. Instagram's so difficult.
Is it? We were surprised that Instagram is. You can sort of get a lot of people to watch your stuff on Instagram. Not an enormous amount. I mean, the problem we find with Instagram and Facebook really is, and it's just getting quite technical now, but they count a 3-second view as a view. On YouTube, you count a 9-second view as a view. Yep. So basically, take a Facebook video view count, divide it by 10, and that's roughly speaking your YouTube video view count. We find that kind of thing. In terms of income on YouTube, I think they do derive a lot of. Some of the big gun channels in America, Iraq Veteran 8888, people like that, they are in the billions of views already. So they are bigger than us. They tend to be about guns rather than hunting. But I think in world terms, we do a channel ranking. We're about 5th in the world across guns and hunting.
Right.
We're biggest in Europe, but I don't think YouTube mind canning things as well, even if they're making money. I mean, Logan Paul, they slapped him pretty hard for bad behaviour. So yeah. If you step out of line, it's been strange that we've had a lot of very good quality brands in shooting media. Magazines like Shooting Times, we've all heard of, The Field. They have really failed to grasp the nettle of the big. I mean, as one publisher described to me, we are now sea urchins in a pool where there are 3 very big sharks called Facebook and YouTube, and so they've kind of been frightened of that. I think you have to look at YouTube and Facebook as enablers, rather like using a printer. If somebody's got to print your magazine, YouTube is where you put your video out, and you just have to cope with that situation. Publishers who bought printers never really seem to prosper from it. So. 20 years ago, if YouTube chucks us off, we will find a home.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Yeah, you've proven before that quite adaptable. When you're saying the 5th biggest in the world, the largest in Europe, is that purely on subscriber metric? You're at 300,000.
Actually, the metric we use is obviously the one that's most favourable to us. When it comes to
so views then.
as you'd imagine. Basically, viewers. Actually, what we use is there's a site called Socialblade, and if you're interested in seeing how big social media is, a channel is, or a what do they call them? An influencer is. Go to Socialblade, and they have the subscriber numbers, they have the view numbers, but they also have a kind of Socialblade ranking, and we find that surprisingly accurate, because you will have channels that have been moribund for 5 years, but they're still picking up good views because 5 years ago they put out good stuff, but there are no advertising prospects. So they will get a D- on Socialblade, and then you've got people who are putting out regular content, getting regular numbers of viewers who are obviously active and a good advertising prospect. Well, they get an A+.
So just going into the channel itself then, Charlie, what's the sort of schedule? Are you posting how many times a week? How does that work then?
Okay, so we've tried for a variety of things, but the one constant, as Robert will know, is 7 p.m. Wednesday UK time is Fieldsports Britain, which is a long-form magazine program about hunting, shooting, and occasionally fishing. And it's a magazine program that's composed of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 items, all linked together by me standing in a field. And off the back of that, we have spun various ideas that have worked in kind of short bursts, sometimes in quite long bursts, but have, well, with the exception of one, have not really managed to kind of gel as a kind of commercially supportable show. So Fieldsports Britain remains the mothership for everything else. I mean, over time we've done Fieldsports Africa, which, you know, the trouble with doing things in English is Americans think you are, as one of them put it, quirky at best. So there's not much you can do about that. You know, you're always going to be Hugh Grant, really, aren't you?
Yes.
Bugger. So you have to look at other ways of doing it. We went to South Africa and we did a series of films with people who are actually part of the hunting industry out there. So it wasn't kind of fat Americans shooting things. It was South Africans explaining behind the scenes what it's like to, you know, run safaris. And that was, I thought, fabulous. You know, you've got some amazing scenery, wonderful animals, great guys, speaking with a South African accent, and it was pretty popular. And then Cecil happened, and, you know, even the gun companies were a bit put off by the reaction to Cecil, which is tricky, because if you're a gun company, frankly, you shouldn't be, but they were.
Yeah.
So Fieldsports Africa stopped after a while. We couldn't get the support for that. Fieldsports Ireland did really well. Jason then moved to England and had a baby, so that stopped, but he's going back to Ireland, so that's okay. But my biggest disappointment really was Airheads, which ran for 70 episodes. It's all about air guns.
Yep.
Doing brilliantly, got the backing of all the big air gun companies, Daystate, Air Arms, BSA, and Crossman, and they just had a bad few years, I'm afraid, the air gun companies. So, you know, they had to pull back a bit. I would love to get Airheads restarted. It was, you know, air guns on YouTube are amazingly popular. Apart from anything else, it was an open goal for audience. And personally, I absolutely love fishing. So we launched Fishing Britain. You know, Hal Morgan, the really great fly fisher who ran it, was fantastic. Aaron Jones, his cameraman, still works for us as production editor on Fieldsports Britain. We just could not. We got the support of Dye where we couldn't maintain that support. I think we made the mistake of running it weekly. We should have run it monthly. That would have been better. So the things that have sustained, the things that have worked, are Field Tester, which is a kit testing show, and, you know, that goes right to the heart of what advertisers want. So actually, that's fine. You know, I think that's a good one. The program that goes out for the members and the shareholders, our Fieldsports Nation group of supporters, is called Fieldsports Extra, and that's based very much around sort of competitions, behind the scenes, that sort of stuff. And so it's quite easy to make off the back of Fieldsports Britain. That's sustained. And then there's a weird thing, which is not exactly a program, but it's a sort of a good series, and it fits into Fieldsports Britain, and that's Fieldsports News. So we were able, thanks to the support of the Fieldsports Nation, to go and hire a good quality journalist, Ben O'Rourke from the South China Morning Post, where he used to be a foreign editor, and he's come over, and so he's a classic, typical hack. You know, he came over here. He kept doing, when he started, he kept doing stories about. He talked about the hunters and then the conservationists. And I was going, no. The hunters are the conservationists. Okay, so you're talking about hunters and the antis, or the antis and the conservationists. Oh, okay. Then he'd go off and forget and do it. You know, but he's got there now. So it's interesting how that kind of that's how Fleet Street, how the modern media thinks. Yeah, and so that's where we are today. Fieldsports Britain, the big one. Fieldsports Extra, Tuesday nights. Field Tester monthly, and we got some surprises coming up in the autumn, obviously.
So I probably should have said, actually, surprises coming up in the autumn will be here, because this won't be out till October, November. Can't remember, but so yeah, if you enjoyed the surprises.
So we've got surprises coming up probably about now.
Excellent. Just on the South Africa side of things there, Charlie, first off, that must have been great. Africa as a continent just fascinates me. But you mentioned Cecil there. I think most of us know what Cecil is, but could you just tell us a bit more about Cecil and why that caused you some trouble?
Yeah, I mean, Cecil was a surprise, and if you're going to have a kind of roundtable chat, it would be fascinating to get the political department of Safari Club International into the room. Walter Palmer would be interesting because, golly, he suffered really, really badly.
Yeah.
I would love to get a representative of one of the companies who, one of the big supporters of shooting media. So there are various sectors. We all know about the gun companies. They're the kind of the big advertisers, ammunition companies, clothing companies. One of the really big sectors is optics companies. And if you are a Zeiss or a Swarovski or a Leica, you have a lot more to your business than just selling hunting scopes. And Zeiss is mostly Meditech, semiconductors. Actually, Zeiss is mostly about bringing life into the world. And here is its heritage of making rifle scopes, which do the opposite. So that's difficult. Swarovski, as we know, is mostly about making sparkly, magical unicorn glass figures. And they have this optics killing unicorn side, and then Leica is mostly about, cameras and photographs of social conscience, and they go off and kill deer. So they have got a big problem, all three of them. And that's just three examples. And then you have something like an outpouring of hatred for a dentist from Illinois who goes off and shoots a lion. Now, first of all, there's been a lot of rubbish about the shooting of the lion and some positives that have come out of this. Okay. For example, the Oxford group that had put the collar around it, some people say they were forced into position. Actually, they willingly and happily have pointed out that trophy hunting is incredibly good for African animals. I don't think their message has managed to get through, but things like that will really help get that message through. Amy Dickman, who is a top-level biologist at Oxford, is a great, she might not think of herself as an advocate for hunting, but she is a great advocate for hunting. As far as how it affected the market goes, as far as how it affected what we put out goes, it really meant Africa was off limits, and that was just so painful. It was the most perfect place to film. Nothing you can do. We can't afford to fly there on our own pocket money, so we just had to kind of slow down everything we were doing in Africa. I hope it comes back. I hope the world gets it. We're already seeing, people from the, I don't know what you call it, the woke end of the media. There's a book out by a Financial Times writer called Henry Mance about animals and our relationship with it, and he goes through and he can, he's a real softie. He doesn't believe in any kind of farming. He barely believes in crops, but he does believe in trophy hunting. So good. Thank goodness for that. He concludes that hunting works for wildlife. So that is a good thing. We see an enormous amount of institutional hatred for hunting. The guy who wrote the DEFRA 25-year plan, Dieter Helm, he wrote a book called Green and Prosperous Land, and it's incredibly logical, analytical. He's an economist. It points out that farming, basically, in pure economic terms, should end. And it'd be interesting to talk about that with you. But you can see his maths. Then you sort of look at the countryside and go, no, that's not going to work. And but he just lambs into hunting for no reason at all. And you go, why? And it's just because he, at the Islington dinner parties he goes to, that is the attitude. That's why people think, like my news editor, they're just, the language they use has been shaped by Cecil. And when it comes to it, there's a thing we have called social license, and we need to re-establish the social license for shooting. So we need to, if you're walking down the street and somebody bumps into you and they say, what are you doing at the weekend? And if 30 years ago you say, oh, I'm going to go to a shopping mall, they go, oh. And if 30 years ago you said, I'm going to go shooting, they might have gone, oh, they like that, And now, it's exactly the other way around. Shopping mall, good thing, and shooting, not so sure. So we've got probably 5 or 6 years to re-establish social license if we possibly can. That's our mission.
And when we mentioned trophy hunting, I've spent a lot of time thinking about trophy hunting more sort of actually in Scotland. We're not shooting many lions in Scotland from what I understand, and this idea might not translate to lions, but the way I see trophy hunting is it solves overpopulation and it brings in money to the area because you've sort of capitalised on that market of maybe not necessarily rich people, but people willing to pay to get that shot. The trophy hunting thing is the trophy is the person that's paying that gets, but the benefit in the local area is huge. Now, I don't know if that's the case with lions, and correct me if that whole idea is wrong, but would you say that's how trophy hunting works and why it,
So there are various things that feed into that. So starting off with the difference between deer and lions, very obvious difference. But in Scotland, the Scottish government has decided you have an overpopulation of deer. All right, whether or not that is right or wrong is a different debate. But let us say the Scottish government is broadly in favour of shooting deer. I'm not sure they're broadly in favour of a state shooting deer. I think if they had a completely clean slate start, they'd probably make shooting deer a civil service operation. But they are where they are. And it is absolutely true to say that 20,000 grateful stalkers, that's paying guests at around about £500 a time, receive heads to put on their wall, 20,000 heads from professional guides in Scotland every year, 20,000. So, if you're going to ban trophies, which is what Lord Goldsmith wants to do,
yeah.
you have to have a view on that kind of thing. Now, there's a few other things to consider before we get onto lions. Yes, then let us accept, for example, there are a lot of deer. If there truly are a lot of deer, and there's a Texan the other day, they've got a huge feral hog problem over there, and he's a ranger, and he said rather memorably, "We can't shoot our way out of this situation." So it is possible to have so many deer, you cannot rely on the sporting community to do it. But then again, we are pretty good at managing the countryside. I mean, I think farming has got some horrors it needs to face up to, but actually the gamekeeping community, pretty well every tree or hedgerow you see from your train window has been put there for hunting or for shooting. That's the point. Now we're going over to lions, and you have a similar idea that lions are there because people are going to shoot them. They're really fabulous cornerstone species. Pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to shoot a lion, and you will pay for a lot of conservation. I always think, when these poor people are being monstered in the press for standing, grinning, grip and grin shots of them holding onto dead animals they've just shot. In that moment, those people are conservation heroes in their own minds, in the minds of the people around them. They have just basically paid for this estate to have all its wonderful wildlife, and then suddenly they're being vilified for being evil murderers. And it's just, you can imagine looking at it going, but I'm a hero. I'm not that bad. The lion situation is fascinating. We have got to come to grips with the different ways that people around the world deal with animals. That is something I've discovered on YouTube. Is there is no real consensus on hunting worldwide. So in America, they go to Africa to decorate their houses, basically.
Yeah. In
China, where I've been shooting, they like to wound animals. They like to injure animals because it keeps them fresh on the way to the kitchen. It's perfectly logical. And of course, here in the UK, we walk slowly towards pheasants until they fly over guns. Now, if I explain pheasant shooting as I have to some of my American friends, some of my Chinese friends, they go, "What are you talking about? That's crazy. That's what kind of day is that?" And similarly, we don't like necessarily what they're doing. So first of all, accept there are lots and lots of different views. If you can accept that, you've got in Africa a situation where, there are about 24,000 lions worldwide. About 8,000 of them, maybe even more than that, are for hunting. Now, that ranges from big ranches down to horrible little cages, canned hunting. And there is certainly a sort of lion process where it pops out of its mother. It's petted by tourists for a price. So they're the cute baby lion tourists. It is shot by an American for a price. So that's the canned hunting. And then it is cut up into parts and sold as medicines to Chinese. And you're kind of in a lion farming area there. And that accounts for a third of the world's lion population. So right now, South Africa wants to get rid of that and actually physically slaughter 8,000, slaughter 1/3 of the lion's population. you got to start making a judgment. I can see the arguments for both sides, but in my opinion, I think it's more up to us to get over our problems with the utility value of lions, and therefore have a wider gene pool for lions, than to just go around going, I don't like it, therefore it shouldn't happen. I think that's where we should probably go.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think a lot of people are guilty of, I don't like that, so let's not talk about it. Whereas the way I see it is, certainly listen to what you said there, that the sort of American mentality you mentioned of decorating a room, you can see why folk would have a problem with that. I personally totally have a problem with the Chinese mentality that you mentioned, but I see no issue with the British version. On that though, and I should also mention, you said that farming has a lot to answer for in the conservation side of things. I agree with you. So if you were wondering where I stood on it, I agree totally, wholeheartedly. Because I'm talking, Zoom won't be showing Charlie, but he's laughing at me at the minute. But the other question I guess I've got for you is, you've said about it seems to be a mainly American market, people coming over. I mean, it's obviously not going to solely be, but from what you're saying, it sounds like it's a large part of it. And sort of in the same sentence, you've said they're going to decorate their house, and also they feel like heroes. So there must be there must be some percentage of them that don't feel like heroes. They are just doing it for the trophy. Or would you disagree with that?
I think you kind of get both. If you go over there, and actually it was a Danish hunter, I said, how much did your rhinoceros cost you? And he said, oh, about a farm. So it costs an enormous amount of money. By any measure, hunting creates the cash that runs the best of African conservation. It's no coincidence the northern white rhino died out in Kenya, where hunting is banned. The southern white rhino is actually doing surprisingly well in South Africa, where hunting is legal. We tend to characterize the southern African hunting countries, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, as wildlife winners. You look at somewhere like Kenya, where wildlife populations are crashing, not entirely because they are anti-hunting, but just because there is no reason to hang on to the wildlife, and there's such an enormous population boom. But Kenya is a clear wildlife loser at the moment, and that is a terrible shame, because it's a great place for wildlife to live if it weren't for the enormous number of shambas. What was the question again?
Well, just sort of the idea of the person who shot Cecil. Yeah, Cecil was alive for some reason. I thought they were
okay. Yeah. Good point. Right. I was with my friend Fausto Attiria III in the United States, and he has a sable antelope horn on one side of his desk, and one of those great curve. Lovely. It's curve, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, he wanted the exact same on the other side, so he basically looked in the catalogue until he found an identical horn to go on the other side, and he went out to Africa and he shot that beast, and he got the horn, and his desk is now complete. So that's what I mean about going to Africa to decorate your houses. Now, at the same time, he poured $20,000 into that conservancy, and that elderly sable buck fell over, but an awful lot of animals did very well out of him. And if he took a photograph of him with his sable, good on him. I say that's for us to get over. Do you know? It's funny you mentioned this problem of. Do you find in the comments below your podcast, there's sort of something I've noticed is even shooters who are, by comparison to anti-shooters, are quite non-judgmental, but even shooters, they have a thing about sort of saying, this is where I am, and these are the people who are better than me, and everything below me should be banned. that sort of seems to be a thing.
I think one thing that we're noticing here is your channel is very much bigger than mine. I have 104 subscribers, so I'm not really getting that many comments, but I know exactly what you mean. I think we're quite bad for, this is where I stand and everything below me is wrong. I very much more prefer to hear the reasons and such, and these things don't just happen. Very rarely they just happen for the crack, there's normally something to back it up. So yeah, I agree. I think there is mentality that I just wondering after the sort of 2 points. what was the next thing I was going to jump on? Yeah, you're mentioning sort of world travel and stuff for this. How has COVID impacted field sports in general? You could focus on the UK, you could focus on, globally. I assume it's had quite a large impact on sort of the trophy side of things for sure.
Yeah. So the 1950s, we've all just enjoyed the 1950s. It's been extraordinary in some respects, especially in the UK, which we have our market has sort of narrowed a little bit to being much more UK because we can only go to the UK. Yeah. Having Zoom calls with our European clients is not absolutely ideal. The toy market has been amazing. We've got a guy called Tim Pilbeam who does a lot of stuff for us. His motto is "The man who dies with the most toys wins." Good point. And so people have got a lot of furlough money in their pocket, and they've gone out and they have bought that new gun they've been promising themselves. I know some firearms licensing authorities across the UK have been on furlough and have been unable to process applications. But I bet you, over the next 2 years, we're going to see a massive rise in the number of people who own guns because, as the Home Office released figures, shooting has been amazingly popular over the last couple of years. So people have gone and bought the kit. The losers are the hospitality industry, the hunting lodges. I think it has been absolutely disastrous for many of them. The choices when you have land in Africa are, do you farm it or do you put wildlife on it? The only reason to put wildlife on it is if people are coming to either see it or shoot it, and shoot it makes a lot more money than seeing it. So if people aren't coming, you start eating the wildlife, I'm afraid. So I don't know what kind of wreckage we're going to discover when we actually go down there, when people go back to the lodges they love and find out it's almost bereft of animals, But as long as animals haven't gone extinct, we can restock. And these big ranches, these big conservation areas in Southern Africa will get their animals back in a few years' time. It's just a kind of tragedy for the time being. Similarly, the shoots that are taking place, I know shoots that have stopped because of COVID and are unable to continue. I don't know yet of people who've actually grubbed up woodland and said, well, we're going to move to farming because there's no point carrying on doing the shooting thing, it's too risky. I'm sure that will happen, but I would say they will probably, if they're not actually bankrupt, they will probably be able to cope with a bit of extra woodland around until they can get that shoot re-established, until some other operator comes in and says, I will run it for you, or whatever it takes.
Yeah, well, my girlfriend's on a shoot, and they were cancelled last year, sort of, November-ish time, but they're back this year, which is good. But yeah,
how did they cope financially? I mean, did they have a kind of shoot bank account and it started to go into the red and that kind of thing? Did they do a cash call on their guns?
I couldn't tell you. I'll ask them and I'll let you know, but I couldn't tell you. It's quite a small based shoot. I don't know if it's just like I don't know. I'm not going to comment. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I honestly don't know. Yeah, it's impacted everything really. Certainly looking at agriculture, the impact's been for the most part positive, and it's hard to say that really, and with what's happened, but prices are through the roof and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the case with venison and trout and stuff. I don't know.
Venison is an absolute disaster because most venison is sold to the restaurant trade, and the restaurant trade's on its nose. Yeah. So that is a really bad one. But then take, for example, the game fair took place at the end of July in England. People had a lot of cash in their pocket from furlough still. They haven't all gone out and bought little red sports cars. They still had enough to go out and buy a lot of things on credit cards. However, they also have, over the last year and a half, made an awful lot of cash in cash. Yeah. And they haven't been able to spend that on Amazon. You cannot use cash on Amazon. So people were turning up to the game fair with rolls and rolls of notes. It was a funny year for standholders. It was a slightly smaller game fair in terms of standholders, or in terms of the perception of how many standholders there are. But those who came absolutely raked it in, both in cash and credit card.
Was that restricted?
In any
no,
because it was all after what's been referred to as Independence Day. So
of course, that's right. Of course, yeah.
Everybody was pretty sensible, and my favourite one was there's Guns on Pegs.
Yes, I've heard of them. Yeah,
the Guns on Pegs always have the best parties. They had the most. Basically, it was a rave as far as I could tell. And then a couple of days later, I know somebody was at the party sent out a picture of his negative COVID test, under which he wrote the single word "miracle."
That's quite good. No, it's great to see these things happening again. I mean, yes, we've got to be wary of COVID and stuff, but it's. I mean, every show we have or are supposed to have isn't happening this year. But we're a bit behind you guys. It's next week or something that things go to. Let's not say independence. That's the wrong word, but freedom.
That's much more Scottish. Could you paint your face blue and just shout freedom for me? That'd be ideal.
Freedom.
So you've got the Scottish Game Fair at Scone, which at the time of recording is upcoming, isn't it? So I think I'm coming to that, or by the time this goes out, I will have been to that.
Yes, of course.
If nothing goes wrong,
I might see you there. I don't know whether we're maybe planning on going. I don't know if Jess might be quite keen, but I might see you there.
Bring Robert. That'd be fun.
Shall do. It'll get to meet his hero. Hopefully you'll be nice to him and it won't be like one of those meeting this hero problems,
It always is. Everybody who meets me is terminally disappointed, as David White will tell you. Yeah.
Oh, do you know, I've just not been happy ever since I met you. The last hour has been hell. You mentioned there.
Typical whinging Scotsman. I mean, you're just trouble, all of you.
I'll take that one. You mentioned sort of the main venison trade is hospitality, restaurants, hotels, that sort of thing. I'm a strong advocate for basically any British produce, really. What are we doing to get venison and trout and pheasant on the plates of the masses, if you
will? So to get that to happen, you need groundswell, and actually that is happening. I'll come on to that in a sec. So traditionally, what we did was I'm going back to the 1990s. I remember a photograph we got at Shooting Times of somebody from Besk. In those days, it was pronounced Besk, and they were handing a brace of pheasants in feather to an MP, and you saw the face of this MP was, "What am I supposed to do with this?" So that was the kind of the basic problem with early pheasant marketing. We had the Game to Eat campaign, the Taste of Game campaign. One was Countryside Alliance, one was Basque. They, at some various stages throughout their lives, did good work and got good funding. Other stages in their life didn't get funding, didn't do any work. And then that was all rationalised a few years ago into the British Game Alliance. Actually, that's not quite true. There is still a Game to Eat and there is still a Taste of Game, but the British Game Alliance is the focus for the mass marketing of game, particularly pheasants. And I mean, one of the problems that popped up was we used to sell a lot of pheasants to factories in the Netherlands and Germany to turn into sausages, and that market just fell off. So what are you going to do? You need to find new big markets. And the BGA has, scored notable successes. It's gone out and found markets in the Far East and things like that. Weirdly, China, where pheasants come from, there's not really a big market for pheasant.
Okay.
But that said, you think about Hunan and bushmeat markets and things like that. They're quite local.
Yeah.
But that said, China is a very, very large country indeed, and it's got a fifth of the world's population living in it. And so you only need a very small specialty meats market, and suddenly you have a huge pheasant market. So well done them. They've done very well. I think it is widely acknowledged that the best kind of individual attempt has been the Country Food Trust, and I mean that is one of my particular favourites. The amazing Tim Woodward, who launched that. It's on the face of it, from a media point of view, it's horrific. It's basically it's patronising. It's rich people giving pheasant soup to tramps. Actually, you should probably pronounce it tramps. It was hairy fellas. But actually, it's incredibly practical. It's taking pheasants, it's turning them into soup, £1 a bag, and the bags go to food banks and they go out to the public that way. And we all know pheasant amazing and nutritious. High levels of protein, very low levels of fat, will not kill you like some meats. So that's the thing. I think what's really helping at the moment is something I've noticed over lockdown. Another lockdown thing is a lot of people have set up little game meat businesses. We had a horror story during the Blair years where a lot of local abattoirs, local game dealers were closed down because they did not meet European Union, European Commission. Nothing wrong with the Europe side of it, but those rules were imposed by the British government and they had to close. So, if you wanted to sell something into the food trade, you had to travel miles. Well, now you're more able to set up as a local food business, and a lot of people are doing it. So, guy who runs Dartmoor Deer Services does a lot of stuff with us, Tom Davis. He does deer boxes. Mike Robinson, the well-known game chef, does deer box, which is delivers venison to people's homes. I met a guy who runs Chiltern Venison, and he used to commute to a job in electronics or something like that in somewhere on the M25 from his home in the Chilterns. Because he didn't have to commute, he got another 4 hours every day to play with. So he set up a little venison business and selling into local farm shops. Absolutely fantastic. Jack Hills runs Exmoor Game, launched during lockdown. Again, that's just a repackaging. That is a marketing operation for game. He doesn't even shoot his own game. Doesn't need to. Buys it in, calls it Exmoor Game, sells it on, and people buy it for that reason. And we're seeing some really big ones coming up. And one of the Somerset shoots has got a new vast game handling plant, and you will start to see its brand name all over the country in shops as it sort of promotes steel shot pheasants. And so good times, really. People are making the investment, getting out there and selling birds.
You do have to think. The big push in certainly in sheep anyway. Lamb production is the chop. Getting that to the affordable one. These are all sort of remarketed products, added value at the farm gate type thing. Is there much in supermarkets or not really?
Well, not yet. But the potential is there. So I went to see Jose Suto, who's a pretty well-known game chef, and he does courses at Westminster Kingsway College in London, which teaches kids. So you get kids who want to be chefs, and they know a lot of the stuff that they would probably know. But game is a mystery to them, and Jose does a kind of complete introduction to game. And there's a kind of wonderful revelation moment in it where he takes a hare and he chops it up in front of the kids, and he takes the back straps of a hare, which are not enormous, but they're there. And he says, "Look at that." He says you can get something like 5 starters out of those back straps, which you can sell at 40 quid each. How much is that hair going to cost you? £5 in the trade, and you can sell it for 200. I mean, that's added value. And you can see it. You can see their little eyes going, "Oh my God, a hare can make me rich." And actually, they're similar. When you're talking about chops, for example, when you're talking about added value and supermarkets, similar with farm animals. But game has got that sort of extra. I really want it. I will pay for. I will pay more for it. It's harder to get hold of that cachet, which I think sensible chefs. Down in the West Country where I live, Cornwall has become a real kind of chefy centre. And most of the chefs down there, obviously fish is a big thing down there, but most of them have grabbed hold of game and are doing amazing work promoting it. And all the chefs, all the TV chefs have gone out and have shot on television.
Yeah.
We've got Jamie Oliver. I think they all went out to shoot wild boar at different times, didn't they? Jamie Oliver, I think he cried and he shot his wild boar, but that was, or maybe he didn't shoot his wild boar. Anyway, Gordon Ramsay didn't cry and he did shoot his wild boar. And I think Marco Pierre White actually laughed while he was shooting his wild boar. Different character.
Both ends of the spectrum aren't great, are they? You just wonder if it's in the industry's best interest to make it up. Maybe bring down the price slightly, still aiming for that added value market with a small percentage. But if you can get it, people are saying, "What's for dinner? Venison and tatties." Then that's a larger market. I'm not an economist.
Venison is just on its face at the moment. You cannot give it away. Cull programs are not being met because they cannot sell the venison and they can't bear the thought of throwing it away. So it's tragic. we need venison to have a value at point of delivery, and it doesn't have one. Until it has one, not much we can do.
No, it's a shame. Hopefully it will, but and it will bounce back. Well, I hope it does anyway. Well, we've went over a lot there, Charlie. I wanted to go on to, we've talked about Fieldsports Channel. I see you've added a podcast, and funnily enough, I know a wee bit about podcasting. I just wondering how that's going for you. Is it getting good views? Folk really enjoying it?
I think I hope people are. So it's a slight cheat. It's half a podcast and half not a podcast. So we have a lot of very long form interviews that come off the back of what we do. You could be chatting to George Digweed, and there are people who will listen to George Digweed for 24 hours because what he says is very, very good. Yeah. But when you're trying to jam it into 30 minutes for Fieldsports Britain, we can't run it for. So we have got that interview, and we don't spend a great deal of time editing it, but that maybe is its value. And so we can run that out as a podcast. Now we stick that on a traditional podcast server, so we use Libsyn. What do you use? Are you Podbean or Libsyn?
Anchor, actually.
Get
so
you.
It puts out to 13, I think, or 15.
Okay, well, you know far more about it than I do. So we use one called Libsyn, and then we crucially we also put it on YouTube as a film. So it tends to get 5,000 to 10,000 views on YouTube because it's a film, and it tends to get from a hardcore of travellers, haven't been many of those in the last year, who download it and listen to it. It tends to get sort of 300 to 1,000 views, listens, on the server. So YouTube is kind of the main focus of that. But I mean, we keep the movie going, we keep the movie running. So you could watch it. There's a comedian called Jeremy Hardy who referred to most of what the BBC put out as voluntary tinnitus. I think that's pretty well where we are with our podcast.
They're good views. I mean, mine's nowhere near that. I think I've got a total views at the minute, and how many have I got released? I'm releasing today, the 15th. I've got in the ballpark of about 5,000, 6,000 views. But in fairness, that started from nothing. I didn't have a Fieldsports channel to say, so I'm quite happy with that, to be honest.
You will. I mean, as with all these things, you just have to sit and wait, and you too will rise like scum. I mean, I did. So I'm afraid that's how these things work. That sometimes you think maybe there are little lurches. Somebody famous tweets you, and you get another little bunch of subscribers. Actually, the line is pretty constant. You're just going to kind of go up and up and up, and don't give up. Never give up.
Maybe name dropping Fieldsports Channel in this should help.
Well, we call it the magic of Fieldsports Channel. No, we don't. No, we don't. Obviously, we shall lend you our audience, and then that will definitely do that.
I've got two kind of more points, Charlie. Because it's not something I know loads about, I've just got loads of questions. Robert was on the phone, he was like, say this. So I'm not going to manage to say everything because I don't want it to go on forever, and I know you'll be busy. But when you Google your name, there's your sort of different channels and stuff like that. But it quite quickly comes to stuff on TV appearances. And normally when you find someone's TV appearances, they're quite positive. Yours aren't. Is TV something that almost works against this type of industry? I mean, the headline is, this morning viewers disgusted by guests attempting to defend trophy hunting. That headline struggles to bring positives.
Okay, so I think we've hit on a really, really important point here, and one of the reasons why we are probably better placed than other larger media organizations. So if you take terrestrial TV as a thing, Channel 4, Channel 5, BBC, ITV, that sort of thing, they belong to a world, they kind of belong to a world of characterized by the man on the Air Ministry roof who's reading the weather. So he's standing there and there's the weather's happening behind him, and yet he's telling you what the weather is, and he's sort of talking down to you. And that is a very kind of that is a very terrestrial broadcaster way of doing things. And many of our detractors across terrestrial, many of them have jobs in terrestrial broadcasting, have that attitude. You are standing on the M&S roof, you're telling your viewers what to think. The Daily Mirror, which is typically the paper that runs these stories. Similarly, if we tell our readers what to think, they will vote Labour. And what's happened to the media consuming audience, which I think many of these people have not spotted, is, and they're much more highly paid than me, but I still think they're being a bit dim about this. Is it has moved from it's moved far more into a kind of into being characterized by the motto, I'll be the judge of that. So a media consuming audience is far, far better informed than it was 20 years ago. It has access to enormous amounts of real life facts, some of them pretty spurious, but they'll come with the capital F of facts. And they will be able to listen to what people are saying and disagree with it. And they are able to look at headlines monstering people and disagree with it. So this came home to me most strongly. I did a thing called Urban Foxes Live with Brian May and 3 RSPCA vets, and I was the evil fox killer. So you go on that show, and it's filmed in front of, it's beautifully lit, amazing production value. It's filmed in front of Battersea Power Station, looks amazing, and they have a fox cub on Brian's lap, and 3 vets who love foxes, who hate hunting, and me. So who's going to be the obvious winner from that? Actually, in TV land, you also have 4 people bullying 1 person. And only Brian was bright enough to work that out. And he very quickly, during the interview, joined my side to make me less of an obvious victim. So make it less likely that people will feel sorry for me. Do you see what I mean? It was a very weird thing, and I didn't know this at the time, and I was trying to rationalize, why is Brian being so nice and defending me, and then it was only with a half a minute to go that I worked it out, and I was able to kind of play on that, and here I am being torn apart by wild animal lovers and things like that. So media works in a very different way to the way it used to. And the ability of the audience to make up its own mind is paramount, and that's particularly characterized by what you're doing, with your podcast, and what we're doing with YouTube. We are not telling people to think this or that. The reason that people listen to us and continue to listen to us, watch us, is we put an arm around our viewers and we say, look, this is what we think, and it's fine if you don't think that, whatever you think, whatever you want to think, but this is how and why and what we think. And people really appreciate that. It's kind of less patronizing, less kind of on top of them.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that. That's the way I've always went. Of this is what I know, this is what I think. I'm not going to tell you what to think. We're both in industries that we deal with antis, whichever type of antis they might be. And the main one certainly in our industry, and I assume it's the main one in your industry, is veganism. And I have always said the many merits of veganism, specifically at certain times of the year in this country. Summer we're producing a lot of great crops. Veganism has a lot of benefits, and in different countries the environmental benefit of veganism is high. But in our country, I feel it's better not to be. That's the way I look at it. Health-wise, from a welfare perspective, if you ethically don't believe an animal should be killed for a gain, again, I'm not going to change your mind on that. That's fair. But how are you guys dealing with antis as an industry?
They are an industry. They really are. Well, in various different ways. People who wear black balaclavas and go out and threaten kids at weekends, we expose them if we can. Okay. You have to, under the rules of YouTube, you have to be careful how you do that.
Absolutely.
But we can do that. The kind of the corporate end, the money making ends, we try to expose the hypocrisy, and we have got this wonderful thing now called the Fieldsports Nation, which is our group of supporters. And not only do they give us £5 a month, and we give them their own special show to watch, but also they get involved in the program making. So, Richard Taylor, who's one of them, is really good at reading balance sheets. So he can read the financial reports from organisations from the RSPB downwards and go, this is what they're trying to hide. This is the bit you should go in on. So we're much better informed, things like that. And these people often call themselves charities and have to be incredibly, transparent in the way they report their financial, where they get their money and where it goes. So that's a good thing. We are obviously, just like any news organisation, able to expose hypocrisy. Some of these hypocrisies are very deep rooted, and it is hard to get our story onto the next level. But we have very good relationships with people in the national news, and although I'm not sure the national news is as taken seriously as it used to be, it kind of helps. It looks serious. One of the people who back us through the Fieldsports Nation, two of the people who back us through the Fieldsports Nation are also the people behind GB News. Now, we don't do anything formally with GB News, but we are at that level of media investor now, which is I think quite important, really, and again gives us the sort of credibility that allows us perversely to talk to people like the Guardian and the BBC and things like that. So there's quite a lot to it. We've turned into an advocacy project. Probably the best thing, according to our viewers, that we do is to produce videos that explain hunting, shooting, fishing as things that real life human beings do, and videos that they can send to their mates, say that you don't really understand why I go hunting, but this video will tell you. And I hope that is, I'm quite pleased that is the thing they like the most. David and I are both journalists. We love the idea of getting a story in there. So I'm going back to Brian May. Can I just tell you one story about Brian May? That made me laugh. All right, okay. So I heard on the grapevine down in Somerset that Brian May was letting the deer stalking on his land. Now, this is a massive hypocrisy moment. This is, humbug, the kind that any newspaper would be overjoyed to print. So I rang up my friend Kevin on the Sunday Times and said, guess what? And he said, okay. He said, I'll look into it. And Kevin he's actually left sometimes, so he's not a typical journalist. He used to run a business in Brighton. He's got his feet are planted very much, on the ground. So he went down to Dorset and he started asking around, and people in Dorset said, oh, it's terrible. Brian May won't let us go shooting in that woodland at all. And he said, yeah, well, that's not really a story. So I said, well, have you tried the game dealer? So Kevin, I was great. I didn't have to do any legwork at all. I was just on the end of the phone. So Kevin went off to the game dealer, and the game dealer said, aha, Mr. May, yes, would you like to see the receipts? Now, all the time this is going on, the people who run Brian May's wildlife sanctuary outside Guildford are sending Kevin emails going, Mr. May wouldn't touch the hair on the head of a single deer. Don't you worry. It's all, he loves animals. It's fine. And then, of course, Kevin has got the receipts now for the deer carcasses that have come off Brian May's land. Okay, the email changes slightly. Mr. May allows the culling of certain sick deer in certain circumstances. Sick deer going into the food chain. Good story. And anyway, this goes on until eventually on Saturday, and the paper is out on Sunday, so we're getting pretty close to the wire. Kevin is sitting with the guy who does the shooting at his home in South Wales, and Brian May rings up and basically says, it's a fair cop, you got me, Governor, I'll come quietly. And Kevin gets his story, and it's absolutely magnificent. I think it was the front page, and Brian May is just, pretty well withdrew from the animal anti-hunting debate at that point. It was a significant win, for us in the there's something of the chase about this, I'm afraid. So I really enjoyed it.
I can tell.
So sorry, Brian. Poor Brian. Shouldn't have kicked me around the studio. There you go. But it was a joy to do. It was an absolute joy to do. And that's when it goes right. And there are many, many, many times when it just doesn't. So there you are.
I'm sure Robert would be angry if I didn't mention that one of your £5 a month patrons is Robert as well. So,
excellent man, good. He's just growing in my estimation every time you mention him.
Jess said last week, actually, we're talking. She tried to sign up, but she couldn't manage. But I'm sure she'll get on soon enough as well.
Okay, well, just basically get some handcuffs, put them on the keyboard. Don't let her off until she's done it.
How much commission did I get for that? I'm conscious of time, Charlie, and I know you'll be busy and you're in a hotel room. We started this at 7 in the morning. I don't want to hold you too much back, but just one short question, and then I've got two questions I always finish it off with, just two short ones. But Matt, I think Matt Coward Hawley got bronze in Tokyo just yesterday or the day before in the shooting competition. Is that sort of thing, seeing shooting as an Olympic sport, does that get young folk in, or is shooting inanimate objects a totally different thing to hunting?
No, I think that there are two things going on there. I mean, our horse riders who got gold, many of them started out in the hunting fields. Matt Coward Holly, all our shooters, generally speaking, shoot pheasants as well. So I was talking to Peter Wilson, who got gold in London 2012, and he said, at that time he was given these terrible strictures by the Olympic Committee here. You're not allowed to mention game shooting, you're not allowed to besmirch clay shooting with live animals, things like that. And so Peter stuck to that at the time, but since then has become really vocal. And we have to. It is a problem. This sort of mild cancel culture that goes on for game shooting, for stalking, all that kind of thing, and we just got to try and stamp it out where we see it. So Olympics is always a good thing. It tends to be a sort of a mild hostage situation with politicians. So when you hear a politician going, shooting should be banned, then you can go, but Matt just won a gold medal at the Olympics for it. And they go, well, right, shooting apart from Matt winning a gold medal at the Olympics should be banned. And, it sort of dilutes their message a bit. I hope it has a positive effect on kids. The pathway to Paris and Olympics after that is there for anybody to do. Shooting is an incredibly accessible sport. I've always said, just actually on the related subject of stalking, from a standing start in any city in the UK, you can go stalking faster, more easily, and more cheaply than you can get a game of tennis or a game of golf with a professional. So we are in exactly the right place. We have this thing in Matt's hands that goes bang. We have a clay pigeon that explodes. Visually so much more exciting than golf. We could, if with a little bit of investment, do really good things on telly with that. So there's a lot to be done there, but broadly speaking, it is positive. The worry is that we have things like the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, where Birmingham appears to be embarrassed about its past as the factory that made all the guns in the world, and doesn't want shooting events. And that kind of politicization of sport for pure ideological gains, if that's what they think they're getting, is nuts. It almost brought the Commonwealth Games to its knees, because the big medal winners, India, were on the point of pulling out. I would have been happier if India had gone through with that and pulled out because of that, but unfortunately they didn't. They were.
Yeah. I'll gloss over the fact of the golf statement, because we'll just get into an argument. I have a
waste of good farming land.
Well, yeah, good point. But we've really went around, and I appreciate the time to talk there, Charlie. So that's been good. I always finish off the conversations with first off, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And second off, which is probably kind of a two-parted question for yourself, if you had any tips for folk coming into industry, so that could be hunting or even YouTube, for yourself, what would they be?
Okay, well, 5 years time. I mean, it's I hope not underground.
Well, I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Doing what I'm doing. If you, it is unquestionably the best job in the world to run a YouTube channel. Whatever it is. If it's something which you enjoy doing, like hunting, shooting, fishing, like I do, it is doubly the best job in the world. It's something you have to push at.
Yeah.
You have to, maintain good relations with your support group, your wife and your children. You have to work doubly hard at that as well. But I would say it's worth it. It's where the audience is at the moment. There's a sort of feeling that the media center of gravity is among the old-fashioned terrestrial broadcasters and old-fashioned publishers, but I think the real audience is heart and soul in social media, and for me, social TV. So if anybody going into that, just keep believing, keep doing it, you will get there. It is a grind, but you will get there. For anybody moving into country sports generally, anybody who wants to do that, the best thing you can do is find somebody who has the time to, encourage you. If you're a kid and you want to go into gamekeeping, knock on the door of a local gamekeeper and say, I will fetch and carry for you, and until I get enough experience, and it will grow from there. Allow it to develop. It's too easy to say just go to a gamekeeping college. That's a good idea, but start by helping out locally if you possibly can. And I'd say that probably applies to, almost anywhere. You want to get into gunsmithing, there are some very good projects run by the Gunmakers Livery Company in London, which will help you do that. But you can't do better than going down to your local gun shop and saying, can I get a Saturday job working here, please? Yeah. That's my opinion.
Excellent. No, I would say so. It's normally a pretty similar answer to that question. It's just work hard and get yourself out there.
Yeah. Can I put in a question for you? Can we have a heated debate about farming very, very briefly?
Can, if you want, aye.
Yeah. So I sort of see a kind of weird supply arrangement, between, let's say, vegans, hunters, farmers. So a kind of triangle. Now, vegans don't particularly like farmers, but they put up with them because they supply them with all the stuff they get to eat. Vegans hate hunters, clearly. Hunters have a slightly unbalanced relationship with farmers. They need the land. Many farmers shoot, so they're kind of close, but it's not a kind of normal relationship. And of course, shooters deeply mistrust vegans. But I see that changing, over time. I think vegans are going to perhaps start falling out of love with farmers as a thing, as a media entity, because they're going to start sourcing their food from South America, and their food is going to go international because the DEFRA plan is basically to move the countryside back to nature. I see gamekeepers as becoming more important in running the countryside. And actually, when you look at it, hunters, shooters have more in common with vegans than they do with farmers, really. It's just vegans have this weird thing about not eating meat. Hunters, shooters are all about local produce, are all about what they get from the land. I almost see farming drifting off slightly, and the hunter vegan kind of cultural link becoming the really important. When I say vegan, I mean the sort of unthinking consumer of food. But let's call them vegans for the time being. And I see that being the kind of central relationship in what the countryside supplies.
Yeah.
So, am I right, or is that complete nonsense?
So first off, Charlie Jacoby sees a future where hunters and vegans coerce. Interesting. So first off, you say the reason for that branching off agriculture further away from the hunting and vegan side, sort of keeping that a bit of an isosceles triangle. The first issue with that is you're saying veganism is going to be sourcing food from elsewhere, South America, whatever. It doesn't really matter, just not here. If you're a vegan from a welfare perspective, that makes sense. But what the vast majority of vegans are vegan for environmental perspective, that doesn't make sense. So I don't see why that would happen. If it does, it's pretty hypocritical. Is hunting closer to the vegan side and the vegan argument than agriculture? Yes, but I only mean from a shooting perspective. And the reason I say that is we're talking about this country, so deer. Yeah, let's talk deer. Out in the wood, walking around dead, that's how it works. The agricultural narrative is out in a field, rushed in a stressful manner into a trailer, stressful journey in a trailer, get to a market and bid on, stressful journey in a trailer, into this place, what's happening, killed. So that's obviously worse than the shooting side, not necessarily the fishing side. So do I see vegans going towards that side if they stick by the sort of reason that they're vegan? No. Do I see it happening because of what you're saying? Yes. it's a very roundabout answer and probably a very political answer, but that's how I see it.
No, I think I do think you need to qualify your answer. It's a very complicated. We're used to making binary judgments and binary choices, and I'm asking you to make a sort of a three-way choice. Just on that, what is the future with it in that context? What is the future of UK farming?
So the future, I don't know if you've seen my page, Charlie. You're probably just aware of the YouTube channel. That the main background of what I do is on Facebook, and the push I'm going for, and a lot of people are, is just sourcing local where possible, trying to create this market in the UK, because Brexit's happened. Don't ask me anything about Brexit. I literally know nothing about politics. We're going to strike deals with Australia, with we have with Australia, probably with the likes of the US, stuff like that. And the standards in a lot of these places are lower. You've got treated chicken, you've got hormone-induced beef, stuff like that. I think that, unfortunately, is the future. And I think the future is petri dish growing food, that sort of thing, scrapings of beef, cells and made into meat products. I think that's the future, and I think that's where we're heading. I don't want that. I think what we have to do is push the local narrative, in the sort of sense, if you help next door, the world helps you. Do I know what the future is? No. I think it's that petri dish way, but I think we really have to, like you guys are doing, push the narrative that surely is good for the countryside and good for us looking at our environmental footprint.
Well, if you come back to what we have to do, I mean, the sense of responsibility for the land is vested in either farming the land or hunting, shooting, fishing the land. So if you lose that, if you swap that out for a civil servant who then manages large areas, who perhaps under the modern way rewilds it, if that's what they want to call it, then that's an environmental disaster. So yeah, I just one thing I really enjoyed was there was a wonderful Labour politician called Rhodri Morgan, who late Rhodri Morgan used to be Secretary of State for Wales, and I saw him give a speech once, and he said as far, I'll try to do the accent, so forgive me if the accent is terrible. He said, as far as we worked out in Labour, he said, China is the world's factory and India is the world's office. He said, South America is the world's breadbasket. He said, Africa will continue to be the world's tragedy. He said, Europe is the world's old people's home. And he said, we haven't quite worked out what North America is yet, but we think it's got something to do with arms and the entertainment industry. But unfortunately, within that, he's predicting the globalization of food supply. And for the mass market, we're going to see food coming from horrible polythene-covered areas of Almeria in Spain, for example, or as you say, chlorinated chicken. And I can't see a way around that until people develop a conscience, or as I call it, a pair, and go out and actively source their food locally. If you're in Islington, it's very difficult to relate to where your food comes from, so you might as well buy a rubbish sandwich from somewhere else. It's a marketing job, isn't it? We're both doing that. Well done, us.
And there's a certain privilege that comes with knowing where your food comes from, and I work with RET, which you might not have heard of, Charlie, but it's the Royal Highland Education Trust, which is basically just it's mainly farming, but there's certainly hunting and stuff involved as well. But it's getting sort of food into classroom, and so many kids, parents, teachers, just don't know, and it's teaching that. However we do it, whether we do it this way, we do it in schools. I think we've just got to sort of lead our life by guiding that narrative, but. The future, unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic about, but hopefully we can push it in the right direction. But we could sit here forever. I'm going to cut this now. But thank you to everyone that's listened. If you've came here from hearing, if you've maybe typed in Fieldsports channel, and unfortunately you've come up with my ugly mug as opposed to the actual channel, welcome, and maybe drop a subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, anything like that, and you're thinking, I wonder if this guy does any more, you're probably not thinking that about me, but just jump onto Rural 2 Kitchen on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll sort of see where everything really happens. And if you want to see more of Charlie, and somehow you've came across me, not Charlie, which I very much doubt, his Fieldsports channel if you want to check that out. So thank you very much, Charlie. We'll speak to you later on.
Thanks a million. Thanks so much.